Michael and Lisa Thompson had always dreamed of having a child. After years of unsuccessful fertility treatments and countless disappointments, they decided to adopt. They wanted to offer a loving home to a child in need, someone who had never known the warmth of a real family. The idea of adopting a teenager initially seemed daunting, but when they came across 17-year-old Daniel at a foster agency, something about him stood out. Daniel was polite, soft-spoken, and carried an air of quiet intelligence. His deep brown eyes held an unreadable depth, but he smiled when spoken to and answered every question with perfect composure. The social worker handling his case explained that Daniel had been in and out of several foster homes due to adjustment issues, but there were no major red flags in his file. The Thompsons saw a young man who had been abandoned, just waiting for a family to accept him. After a few supervised meetings, they made their decision. Daniel moved in within a month. The transition was smoother than they expected. He was respectful, kept his room clean, and always offered to help around the house. He rarely expressed strong emotions, but Michael and Lisa assumed it was due to his past. Trauma could do that to a person, and they didn't want to pressure him. At first, life with Daniel was almost too perfect. He was obedient, never asked for anything, and seemed content with whatever they provided. But there were small, almost imperceptible things that felt off. He never seemed surprised or confused, as if he had already anticipated every situation. He never asked about house rules, but somehow followed them flawlessly. He never overslept, never complained, and never made mistakes. Lisa noticed that he had an unusual way of moving, silent, calculated, as if every step was measured. One night, she walked past his room and saw him sitting in complete darkness, staring at the wall. When she asked if he was okay, he turned to her with a polite smile and said he was just thinking. She didn't press him further, but something about the encounter unsettled her. Michael, too, had his concerns. Daniel was unusually skilled at fixing things around the house. When their garage door broke, Daniel repaired it in minutes without looking up a tutorial. When Lisa's car had an issue, he diagnosed the problem like a trained mechanic. It was impressive, but strange. He never mentioned where he learned these things. Their dog, Baxter, was the first to react differently. Normally friendly, Baxter refused to go near Daniel. Whenever the boy entered a room, the dog would lower his head and growl softly. It was the only time they had ever seen Baxter act aggressively. They assumed it was just a reaction to a new person in the house, but Baxter's behavior never changed. One evening, Lisa decided to do something special for Daniel. She baked his favorite cookies, hoping it would make him feel more at home. When she handed him the plate, he thanked her, but stared at the cookies without touching them. After a long pause, he finally took one and ate it, but there was no enjoyment in his expression, just a quiet observation, as if he were analyzing something deeper than just a simple cookie. Lisa brushed off her unease, telling herself they were just overthinking things. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about Daniel was not quite right. Daniel's past was nothing like the files suggested. His life before the Thompsons was not a series of unfortunate foster placements, but a carefully structured existence designed for one purpose: obedience. He had been raised in secrecy, away from the ordinary world, in a facility where names meant nothing, and survival was the only goal. The people who trained him never spoke about compassion, love, or family. They spoke about strategy, control, and precision. From a young age, Daniel had been taught to move without making a sound, to observe every detail in a room, and to anticipate a person's actions before they made them. He had learned how to dismantle locks, how to disappear in a crowd, and most importantly, how to eliminate a target without hesitation. His mind had been shaped to serve a mission before he was even old enough to understand what that meant. But something changed along the way. The program that created him was disbanded under mysterious circumstances, and the children who had been raised within it were scattered, hidden in plain sight. Some were sent to live under assumed identities, while others were placed in unsuspecting homes. Daniel had been one of the latter. His placement with the Thompsons was not random. It was a calculated decision. Someone had ensured that he would end up in their home, though the reason remained unclear even to him. Unlike the other houses he had been placed in before, this one was different. The Thompsons treated him with kindness he had never experienced. They asked about his feelings, something he had never been encouraged to consider. They left their doors unlocked, trusting him completely. They welcomed him into their lives as if he had always belonged there. It was unfamiliar, but Daniel did not resist it. He studied them as he had been trained to study all subjects. Michael's routine was predictable. Early morning runs, coffee at exactly 7:15 a.m., work calls that lasted until dinner. Lisa was meticulous in her habits, setting the table the same way every evening, locking the back door at precisely 9 p.m. and always checking the stove twice before leaving the kitchen. Their lives were built on small, comforting patterns, and yet Daniel never let himself forget the truth. He was not here for a new life. He was here because someone had placed him here, and sooner or later he would find out why. His instincts told him to remain patient, to wait for the moment when the real reason behind his placement would reveal itself. Late at night, when the house was quiet, he listened. He could hear the soft breathing of his adoptive parents, the rustle of tree branches outside, the distant hum of a car passing on the street. He moved through the darkness without effort, testing the locks, memorizing the exits, calculating every possible scenario in his mind. There was no fear, no uncertainty. He was simply preparing. Because if there was one thing Daniel knew for certain, it was that nothing in his life had ever been left to chance. Daniel's past was far from the tragic foster story the Thompsons believed. His life had not been a series of misfortunes, but a calculated journey, one he had never controlled. He had been raised with purpose, trained from childhood in a facility where emotions were weaknesses and instincts were sharpened into weapons. The program that molded him didn't just teach survival, it built something far more dangerous, a mind capable of executing orders without hesitation. He was not meant to be an ordinary teenager. His childhood had been stripped away and replaced with discipline, precision, and control. Every morning, he had woken up to drills that tested his endurance, physical strength, and ability to think under pressure. He learned to recognize threats before they formed, to dismantle security systems, and to manipulate his surroundings to his advantage. He was conditioned to blend in, to be whatever was necessary to complete an objective. Then, one day, the program ended. No explanations, no warning. The facility was dismantled, and the children, including Daniel, were placed into the world under new identities. Foster agencies were used as a cover, placing them into unsuspecting homes with no knowledge of what they were actually welcoming into their lives. Some of the other trainees had disappeared after their placements. Daniel had never heard from them again. His time in different foster homes had always felt temporary, like an assignment waiting for activation. But this time was different. The Thompsons treated him like family, an unfamiliar concept to someone like him. They asked about his past with genuine concern, cooked meals for him, and gave him a room that wasn't just a place to sleep, but a space of his own. Their warmth confused him, but it did not break through his discipline. He knew better than to trust comfort. Yet Daniel couldn't ignore the way Michael and Lisa lived in patterns, predictable, repetitive, almost too easy to follow. Michael left the house at the same time every morning, his route unchanged. Lisa always kept her purse by the kitchen counter, her keys in the same place. They never checked their surroundings, never questioned the security of their home. They had no idea how vulnerable they were. Late at night, when they were asleep, Daniel moved through the house in silence. He memorized every corner, every possible escape route. He tested the locks, measured the time it took for the streetlights to turn on and off, and observed the neighbors' routines. He was not acting out of paranoia. This was preparation. It was what he had been trained to do. Still, something was missing. In every other home, he had always received an order eventually. A call, a letter, a message that told him what came next. But this time, there was nothing. The silence was unsettling. If he had been placed here, there had to be a reason. Daniel waited. Sooner or later, the answer would come. And when it did, he would be ready. The first signs of unease began as small, almost forgettable details, things that wouldn't normally raise suspicion on their own. Lisa noticed them first. She had always been an observant person, someone who trusted her instincts, but when it came to Daniel, she kept dismissing the feeling that something was off. He was polite, respectful, and never caused trouble. But there were moments when he seemed too controlled, too precise in the way he moved, as if every action had been carefully planned in advance. One evening, as Lisa was preparing dinner, she accidentally knocked a glass off the counter. It should have shattered against the tile floor, but before it even hit the ground, Daniel caught it with lightning-fast reflexes. His grip was steady, his expression unreadable. Lisa laughed nervously, thanking him, but as she turned back to the stove, a strange feeling settled in her stomach. No normal teenager moved like that. Michael also began to feel uneasy. It started when he noticed the locks on the doors. He always locked the front and back doors before going to bed, but twice in the same week, he found them unlocked in the morning. He assumed he had simply forgotten until he made a point to double-check. One night he locked the doors, pulled on the handles to make sure they were secure, and went to bed. The next morning the back door was slightly ajar. Then came the security system failure. They had installed it years ago and never had a single issue, but suddenly the cameras stopped working one night. When Michael checked the footage, he found nothing but static for several hours. The company claimed it was likely a software issue, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. The unease turned to fear when Lisa's car brakes failed. She was driving home from the grocery store when the brake pedal suddenly became unresponsive. Her heart pounded as she swerved off the road, narrowly avoiding an accident. When the mechanic inspected the vehicle, he found the brake line had been deliberately tampered with. Someone had cut it cleanly, not in a way that looked accidental or the result of wear and tear, Michael and Lisa couldn't ignore the growing number of strange occurrences. Their once peaceful home now felt like a place filled with unseen threats. They started questioning everything, and their thoughts kept circling back to Daniel. He was always present, always watching. Michael decided to dig into Daniel's past. He contacted a private investigator asking him to look into the boy's previous placements. When the investigator called back days later, his voice was tense. Daniel's records were incomplete, but there was a pattern. Every foster home he had been placed in had experienced strange accidents, some of which resulted in disappearances or deaths. The families either went missing, were involved in fatal incidents, or moved suddenly without explanation. Michael hung up the phone, his hands shaking. The realization was terrifying. Daniel wasn't just another foster child with a troubled past. He was something else entirely. And now, he was living in their home. Michael and Lisa knew they couldn't wait any longer. The fear that had been creeping into their lives was now impossible to ignore. Every instinct told them they were in danger. Daniel was not who they thought he was, and if the pattern from his past placements meant anything, then they could be next. Michael tried to act normal, but his mind raced with possibilities. He needed proof, something concrete to take to the authorities. The investigators' findings were alarming, but there was no official record of wrongdoing. Foster families disappearing or meeting tragic fates could be explained away as coincidence, but Michael knew better. He decided to search Daniel's room while Lisa kept an eye on him, waiting until Daniel left the house for his usual evening walk. Michael went inside. The room was spotless, almost unnaturally so. The bed was made with military precision, and there were no personal items lying around. No pictures, no clutter, nothing that made the space feel lived in. He checked the drawers empty, the closet, only neatly folded clothes. There was nothing to suggest that a teenager lived there. But then Michael noticed something strange. The nightstand had a small gap in the back panel, as if it had been tampered with. His hands trembled as he pried it open. Inside was a small, hidden compartment. What he found made his blood run cold. A burner phone, disconnected but with a history of encrypted messages. A small notebook filled with handwritten codes and symbols, and beneath it all, a folded piece of paper with a date, today's date. Next to it, in neat, precise handwriting, were 2 words: activation confirmed. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He stuffed the items into his pocket and rushed downstairs, heart pounding. Lisa saw the look on his face and knew something was wrong. He grabbed her hand and whispered that they needed to leave now. But before they could make it to the front door, the power went out. The house was plunged into darkness. Lisa gasped, clutching Michael's arm as an eerie silence settled around them. Then came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps from the second floor. Daniel was home. Michael's mind raced. Had he seen him in the room? Did he know they had discovered the truth? The air was thick with tension as the footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. Michael reached for his phone to call the police, but there was no signal. The security system was down, the doors wouldn't open, and the windows had been locked from the outside. Every possible escape route had been cut off. A quiet voice broke the silence from the darkness. Above. "You shouldn't have done that." Michael's pulse pounded in his ears as he realized the truth. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Daniel had been waiting for this moment, and now the hunt had begun. The house was silent, except for the slow, steady footsteps descending the stairs. Michael tightened his grip on Lisa's hand, his mind racing. Every exit had been secured, every possible escape route blocked. Daniel had planned for this. They had no way out. Shadow moved at the edge of their vision. Michael's instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. Lisa clung to him, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The air was thick with fear, the darkness pressing in around them. Then Daniel spoke. His voice was calm, measured, almost emotionless. "I was hoping you wouldn't look." Michael's stomach clenched. He knew they had made a mistake by searching his room. Daniel had been playing along, pretending to be the perfect son, but now the mask had come off. Michael's hand inched toward the kitchen drawer where they kept a knife, but before he could reach it, Daniel moved. He was impossibly fast, a blur in the dim light. Michael barely had time to react before he was shoved backward, slamming into the counter. Lisa screamed, stumbling away, her eyes wide with terror. Michael scrambled to his feet, pain shooting through his ribs. "Why are you doing this?" he gasped. Daniel tilted his head slightly, his face unreadable. "It's not personal." Michael's heart pounded. This wasn't a random act of violence. Daniel had been placed here for a reason. The note in his nightstand, the activation order, it all made sense now. Someone had sent him, trained him, and now they had given the command. Lisa darted toward the back door, but Daniel was faster. He cut her off effortlessly, blocking the exit with an eerie calmness. "There's no point in running," he said softly. "It'll only make things worse." Michael lunged forward, using every ounce of strength to tackle him. They crashed to the floor, struggling in the darkness. Michael fought with everything he had, but Daniel was precise, controlled. His movements weren't wild or panicked. They were efficient, like someone who had been trained for this exact moment. Lisa grabbed a heavy vase from the counter and swung it with all her strength. The ceramic shattered against Daniel's head, sending him staggering backward. Michael seized the opportunity, grabbing Lisa's hand and pulling her toward the garage. They sprinted through the door, fumbling for the car keys. Michael jammed them into the ignition, his hands shaking. The engine roared to life, but before he could shift into reverse, Daniel was there. He leaped onto the hood of the car, his eyes cold and unblinking. Michael floored the gas pedal. The car lurched backward, sending Daniel tumbling to the ground. Without hesitation, Michael slammed the car into drive and sped out of the garage, tires screeching against the pavement. They didn't stop. Not until they were miles away, the house nothing but a distant nightmare. The police never found Daniel. The foster agency had no record of his real identity. It was as if he had never existed. But Michael and Lisa knew better. Somewhere out there, Daniel was still waiting, still watching, and they would never feel safe again.